Hi, welcome to the channel. So, you need some smart imagery or video content for your business or your clients for social media, website banners, or to demonstrate or train people within your organization on your product or service, or you're just telling your company story. You'll always need to go through the same process if you want the content to fulfill its purpose. So, I'm Tim Spires, and I'm going to go over with you the brief, ideation, project management, production, and delivery. So let's dive in. Hi. So first of all, let's talk about the brief. Very important to have a strategy about whatever you're doing. And part of that is to have a clear brief. So it doesn't matter whether you're working with a client and you need to either get them to give you a brief or you've got to create a brief from the meetings that you're having with them, or whether you're just working in a small company or on your own, you still want to document these points so that you're very clear in what you're producing and you're not wasting your time, money, and efforts here. So, what's included in your brief? So, I'm going to talk about what's the content, your audience, platforms, why they're doing it, outcomes, deliverables, budgets, mood board, and brand pack. So, quickly going through all these, what's the content? So, first of all, what are you creating this video for? Are you photographing clothing? Is it going to be, an editorial shoot, creative pack shots? Is it going to be creative shoot for social media? Are you doing a video blog? So, what's the actual content going to be made up of? Next, you want to be looking at the audience. So be very clear on who the audience is. And that could vary depending on the platforms you want it to go out on and the purpose of the video. But defining that and understanding that will certainly help in the whole creative process. And then again, as I just mentioned, platforms. So what platforms are you going to be putting your content out on? So is it going to be on LinkedIn, on YouTube? Is it going to be sitting on just on your website, or is it for Instagram, or where's that going to be shown? Because all that will be really important, as you'll see as we go further on. And then why are you creating this content? So great, again, to make sure it has purpose, you ought to be very clear about why you're creating it. What do you want it to do? And again, this goes to my next point of what's the outcome? What's the preferred outcome of this? If you're creating a video ad, for example, you might want to encourage people to swipe up, to click through, to hit a button to learn more, drive them to your website. Be very clear about what's the actual outcome. If it's internal within your company and you're using it for training purpose, there needs to be an outcome, and then that can also be measurable, and you can analyze how effective it was. But you can't unless you've got a clear outcome. So this is where you'll be, putting in your aims and objectives. So, and these things can then, an aim is a bigger picture where you're taking it. An objective is something that is specific and measurable. Okay. Next is what's the deliverables. So again, it depends, as we said, on the platforms, etc. Because the deliverables, might have different frame rates, codecs. Is it going to be 1080p, 4K? Are they going to be just 30-second long pieces of work? Is there going to be one of them, 5 of them? So what's the actual deliverable? If it's photographic content, are you doing, 50 creative pieces? So what size are they going to be? What's the pixel formats, etc. So be clear on your deliverables. So you've got something you're aiming at, or your client knows what what they're expecting, or you know what you've got to create for your client, and be very specific about that. And then again, budgets. Up front, always know what your budgets are. Again, even if you're working on your own, you might need some props, or some third-party software, or there can always be some sort of costs on bigger projects. You might be working with actors and models, or you need props, and there's many things that go into understanding that. So be clear about budgets. Next is mood boards. So either you should be creating a mood board for yourself, or your client provides one, or you might have to create one for your client from the briefing meetings that you'll be having with them. And so in your mood board, you want to structure it so it's very clear that all the information's in there up front. And then that can be used also in not only in part of the ideation process, but as in the whole production process and the deliverables. So all that wants to go in that. And if you're working if it's creative photography, then you might want some reference material in there, some examples in there. And so when you're doing your briefing on your shoot day, everyone's on the same page. You can all use that as a reference. And if you've referenced anything from your research, then that can all go in there as well. If you're working with hair and makeup artists and stylists, then they can all have a page where there's examples and clear guidelines on where they're going, the direction, the look and the feel, and everything can all there be documented, again, so everyone's on the same page. Next is brand pack. I always like to ask for this up front because you'll find if you don't, you'll get into post-production and suddenly you don't know what the font is, what the colours are, etc. You haven't got the logos, and then you're just looping back around trying to get those, whereas you get it all up front. And it might be relevant to how you're designing the project that you're working on as well, particularly with colours and things like that. Mood, look, feel, all that is important. So there we go. That's a little overview on getting a good brief together, some of the things you need to be considering. Then next is the ideation process. So even though a client may have given you a clear brief, you want to be working with them on the whole creative process. Or equally, you might be working on your own and or in a small team, and you've got to go through the creative process to define what you're doing and to refine what you're doing. So you will go through the concepting process. So that's where you're going to be deciding, what it's all about, what's the concept. And a good place, is to do research on the internet. Again, any ideas you put into your mood board, and then you can start creating a theme around what you're doing. And this can apply to every project that you work on, even video blogs. That you want some sort of concept and theme that runs through all your video blogs, for example. If you're working on creative photo shoot, then conceptualizing what you're doing is very important. Again, I just mentioned earlier the mood, look and feel, to be quite clear about that. Again, that's also knowing your audience and where you're going to be putting the work, that it's got to have a certain look and feel about it. And knowing the brand, so the brand pack, again, that's where that comes in, to make sure you are capturing the right look and feel of the brand. And even for your own brand, this is important. And again, earlier I mentioned research. So research is super helpful You can start with some kind of concept, get some kind of idea, or you can research and see, well, what are other people doing. So that gives me some ideas, or maybe I want to do the opposite to that. I want to make sure I'm not doing what other people are doing, and then do a ton of research around this, and again gather as much information as you can. Next part of the process is teamwork. So whether it's within your team or you're working with the client's team, coming together on these creative processes is so important. Being creative is not I always think of it as it's not a one-man job. Good creativity comes out of people working together and bouncing ideas around, setting little seeds in people's minds that come together. And even if a client's given you a very clear brief for the creative process, discussing that, adding to that, or even not criticizing it, but giving a little bit of what you think might not work, rather than just being a yes man. That's no good in the creative process. That's not going to help, because they might be going, something better might come out of a little bit of pushback, just trying to refine what you're doing. And equally, if you're in the creative process, you're putting the creative ideas forward, you want people to give you a little bit of pushback, to question what you're doing, that are discussing what you're doing, not just agreeing with what you're doing and your ideas, because that's when better things can come out of it. So never be afraid to be a little controversial, question things, discuss things, and just see if any ideas come out of that. So yeah, that's really one of the most important processes in the creative process. And then refine, as I just mentioned. So just fine tuning how it's all coming together to get the best piece of work possible. And lastly, think about the purpose again of what you're doing, and does this creative idea fit the purpose? Will it fulfill the purpose? So in the title, I called it how to create amazing content. And amazing is, well, what does amazing mean? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But really amazing is when it's fit for purpose, and it's got to do what you wanted it to do, or what the client wants it to do. So that's why I'll often use the term purpose-driven content, because you want to have a really good, clear purpose and drive your content at that, and keep that uppermost in mind always. So my next section is project management. So it doesn't matter what size of team you're on, even within your department, you've got to be project managing some moving parts. So even if you're a videographer or a photographer, or you're running the marketing department, or you're a marketeer, you need to be project managing. So you've got things to consider on this creative process of the team. Who do I need to work with? If it's just yourself, well, what different hats, what different roles are you playing? And are you fulfilling all those roles? If you're working with a group of people, well, who's that going to be? Who do you need on your team? And what talent do you need? And project managing, gathering and drawing those all together. Location is another element on any creative production. So it speaks for itself, and you might need to scout locations. You might have a studio space that you use, or office space that you can use, but for every project that might be different. So just logging that, be clear about that. And then timelines. So always have clear timelines and milestones, so you're moving along at the right speed. So again, even if you're working on your own, then as an individual content creator, create timelines for yourself, and as much as you can, stick to them and hold yourself accountable. If you're working with clients or corporations, then they will certainly need timelines, or they'll be giving you timelines. And so your production's got to work within that, because there'll be specific deadlines that, things will go to launch, etc. So it's really important you stay on top of that. Really important. You want to be thinking about what kit you need, what equipment you need. Do you have what you need? What will you need on the day? Do you need to hire anything extra in? So that's very important. Next, props. So whatever you're doing, you end up needing stuff. So it might be the clothing you're wearing, or if it's a food production, then what food products do you need? If it's for a shoe brand or a fashion brand of any kind, and you're doing creative flat lays, then you're going to need some propping. All those kind of things. Do I need a stylist I'm working with that's going to do the prop sourcing? All that needs to be thought through, managed, and put on a timeline. And that leads me into my next point, finance, because all that will need sourcing and paying for. And so again, we talked about you working with budgets. You've got to manage finance as well. So, and it doesn't matter on what scale or what level that's on. There's always money involved, so you just need to keep your eye on that. So my next section, we come into production. So production day, we want to be thinking about initially the setup. So have you got all your kit? You've prepped that all for your production day. All your batteries are charged for whatever you're using. You've got all your props and your clothing, whatever you need is all in place. And you've got to set up your production. Again, doesn't matter whether you're a one-man creative content creator, you'll still have some kind of setup and things to think through. So production day, plan ahead, make sure you've got everything ready, and get in there, get it all set up. Next, we talked about reference material. So you're having your mood board to hand and having access to that reference material. So it's inspirational for yourself, it's a reminder for yourself, and if you're working with a team, you want to be having a briefing meeting, which probably partly comes into project management, but having the briefing meeting so that everyone is on the same page. And so you'll be using your reference material, your mood boards, to hold that briefing. And then I think one of my biggest tips that I'll give you today is on any production is take your time. So there's always time pressures on getting things completed, whether we're trying to get a lot in a day done, or whether you've given yourself a certain time limit, or you've only got your studio space to a certain time, or you've got to move on to something else. And there's always those pressures of time. You're working with a client on a job, and you've got 40 different outfits to photograph or something like that, and you're still adjusting the lighting and just the camera height, or you're not quite happy how it's propped, or and they're getting a bit edgy and a bit this is going to take long. And my advice is put their minds at rest and take your time at the beginning. Take your time, get it absolutely perfect in your mind, so you feel really comfortable and confident about your setup, about your lighting, about your audio, whatever you're doing. Because once you've got that, you will just work so fast and confidently go through and smash it. If you're always slightly unsure, slightly unhappy about something, every time you're constantly, every time you take a shot is what I was going to say, but it could be filming, whatever you're doing, um, you'll always be like, oh, is that right? Is that, I'm not quite happy? I might need to make a little adjustment. You'd be spending it all day adjusting things, but just slow down, get it nice, and then you can just concentrate on the creative process then. And lastly, always try and get extra content. So whatever you're doing, always try and think, what else can I capture now? What else can I create now? Because you might not have it planned in, but you later will be like, oh, that's really helpful and really useful, or you give the client a little extra, and it just is always helpful. Obviously, not to the detriment of fulfilling the brief. Don't get sidetracked, but always constantly think, what other content can we be creating today, either at the same time, alongside what you're doing, or at the end of the day, whatever extra things can you be creating. So if you're filming, what other B-roll can you be getting? If you're photographing, what other video content could be created at the same time? While you're shooting or filming, could you just quickly get it from a different angle, just in case you need that? Could that be extra useful content? Or if it's getting to the end of the day and you might have a tiny bit of time, what other little examples could you be working with that could be useful later in the day? Okay, so cool. Lastly is delivery. So, the job's a wrap, and then you want to be keeping your eye on all your post-production. And also, firstly, your deadlines. Know your deadlines. So, and we talked about timelines. So, keep your eye on your timelines. Know what your deadlines are, and stick to them. Just make sure you're moving everything along in your delivery process. That's all focused on your deadlines. My other bit of advice is always send an example of what you're doing to the client, or create an example if you're working on your own, and have someone else look over it with you. Or for clients, do a rough cut of your video content, or do a sample edit of your imagery, and just get it over to the client for approval. And just to make sure you're all on the same page, then you're going in the right direction. It puts them at ease as well, gives them confidence in what you're doing, and it just also gives you the confidence that you're going along the right lines, or it gives them a chance to go, well, can we make these adjustments, or can I make these slight changes? It's better to know that at the beginning of this process, at the final process. Better to know it then than get to the end and have to rework it all. So even if you have to loop that around a couple of times, encourage them to give feedback or pushback or whatever it is. And that'll help you in the long run immensely. So then, as I said, refine. So keep refining that process, and even when you're done, leave it. Come back to it the next day. Make sure you've given yourself enough time to come back at it with fresh eyes. If you've got editors and retouchers, let them produce their work and then look at it. You might ask for adjustments, but then go back to it another day and just look at it with fresh eyes and look for any little tweaks and adjustments. You'll find fresh things will come through for you, and then just tweak those. And then finally, get approval for the job and make any adjustments and tweaks as needed. Again, if you're working with yourself, run it by someone, get their opinion, their feedback, making the adjustments as is needed, so that you're comfortable that it's good to go. And really, that's it. That's the whole process, from beginning to end. And as I said at the beginning, this doesn't matter whether it's a small project, a really large project. You're working within a corporation or for a corporation, and there's a lot of moving parts. Then this is even more important. But even if you're just working a small team or just yourself, going through this process, you'll find really helpful, especially that creative process, because often we can go, I kind of got this idea, but I just don't know how to make it interesting or how to bring it together. If you make yourself go through that creative process of that ideation and follow that through, you'll find it will all start to come together, and one great idea will lead on to another great idea. And it can be a learned, taught process that you go through, and you just use that as a system, basically. And putting those all together, you'll create great content over and over again. So I hope this has been really useful, and please follow or subscribe to the channel. And I've got other videos on how to write briefs, etc. So I'll put links to those in the comments below or in the description. So thank you for watching, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one. Cheers.